Socialism. One of the more lasting things we've had our claws in. I'd say I'm sorry about all the suffering it has caused you in the past and is currently causing, but honestly, it's your own fucking doing. It's no secret that the denizens of hell make a job out of plaguing humanity with troubles and tribulations, but we never expected you to take the ball and run with it so well. Typically, we expect a good plague or curse to last a generation, maybe two. The whole Nazism thing only lasted about 25 years before you snuffed that out. Not the best return on our investment there. Did manage to net over 70 million deaths between the war effects like disease and starvation, and the Holocaust, so not the biggest loss we've taken, but I did lose a bet to Asmodeus on it, so I'm still pissed about that. Anyway, communism, socialism, or whatever you want to call it, depending on the estimates, and not counting wars, the death toll ranges from 40 million to 240 million dead. Hell, even the Black Plague, one of our best efforts if I do say so myself, killed only 50 million. That socialism is still a thing really is a testament to the fact that humanity loves its suffering. It was famously said that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. You'd think the failures of the USSR, Cuba, the Maoist regime turning into an authoritarian capitalist regime, and North Korea would have taught you something, but no. Your latest experiment with communism, and the most glowing endorsement for its abject failure to accomplish anything of merit, is Venezuela, and its continuing spiral into absolute desolation. The recent nationalization of the GM factory there is just the most current event in the country circling the proverbial drain. No one even knows why they seized the GM plant either. They weren't exactly cranking out cars given the horrid economic situation there, not having created a new car since 2015. They've been merely making replacement parts. There are theories that the government is trying to rid itself of every vestige of the capitalist economy, but who knows. The socialist regime in Venezuela, started by Hugo Chavez in 1998, has destroyed the country in such an unimaginably total way as to make it one of the closest things to hell on earth I can find outside of the Middle East war zones. The sad part is, this country could be so incredibly wealthy if they only got rid of their government. They have oil reserves that best Saudi Arabia, which makes it the country with the world's largest oil reserves, something around 298 billion barrels of oil per a 2015 estimate. So, why are they dirt poor and starving worse than Ethiopians? The socialist government nationalized the oil industry around the 2007 timeframe and subsequently ran it into the fucking ground. In 2010, they seized by force 11 private oil rigs. And what is the result of the fine revolutionaries that seized and run the oil rigs and refineries? Minions, please pay attention here. Country with the largest oil reserves in the world has to import fuel because the rigs and refineries are so broken down that they can't produce it anymore, nor can they even get crude oil out of the ground. The country is now in the midst of a fuel shortage because the economic policies of the socialist government requires them to buy fuel at market value from the open market and then sell it for pennies on the dollar to citizens. Anyone who has taken a basic economics course or balanced their fucking checkbook would know you cannot keep this up for very long. Allow me to recap this before I move on to the next point. The country with the largest oil reserves on the planet has to import fuel because their government-run infrastructure is so broken down and faulty they can no longer reliably produce fuel, and the socialist economic policies in place require them to take a massive loss on each drop of fuel imported. At some point, I'd expect people to walk out with pickaxes and buckets and just start digging. Now, on to the effects of all these lovely socialist policies. Insane inflation, breadlines, starvation, and eating the zoo animals. No, I am not making that up. Venezuela's inflation was steady at around 30-some-odd% for decades, but in the past few years has spiked up over 700%, reaching an all-time high of 800%. And what is the government's response? Blame the rest of the world for waging an economic war on Venezuela. Yep, that'll fix everything. Blame someone else. For a while, the government couldn't even buy money anymore. The companies that print money for governments refused to make any for Venezuela because it refused to devalue its currency and the small bills they wanted to purchase were literally worthless. We are talking about Weimar Republic levels of inflation, having to use gym bags full of cash to pay for a meal. They have since recanted and ordered larger bills, but too little, too fucking late. The hyperinflation has led to the collapse of the most basic economy, as even staples such as bread are nearly unattainable due to lack of raw materials, so that people are starving en masse and resorting to hunting local birds and wildlife. Want to know what a flamingo drumstick tastes like? Ask a Venezuelan. Meanwhile, the government has strictly enforced rules on what bakeries can make, proclaiming that the scarce resource of flour should primarily be used to make bread and is utilizing soldiers to enforce this rule. And the results of that? Bakers arrested for making illegal brownies. Not pot brownies, mind you, just regular old, yummy brownies. Let that sink in for a second. The government has since taken over their bakeries with the current president, President Maduro, saying, quote, "Those behind the bread war are going to pay, and don't let them say later it is political persecution," end quote. Right. Oh, and people are still starving. So, inflation, starvation, bread lines. Oh yes, zoo animals. In August of 2016, some intrepid and I assume very hungry Venezuelan citizens broke into the zoo, found a pen with a horse, and butchered it right there on the spot, leaving the head and ribs for the zoo staff in what can only be imagined as the worst way to start your workday. Worse yet, multiple other animals have been stolen from the zoo earlier in July, presumably for their meat as well, so this is not an isolated incident. I would place a bet that this sort of thing will happen again if the whole country doesn't collapse entirely. On a side note, humanity is all fine and dandy with human suffering, but let an animal suffer? Oh heavens no. National Geographic ran an article lamenting the animals starving in the zoo, and I can't help but laugh at the misplaced priorities. They should sell off or transfer rare or endangered animals to places that can take care of them properly, or if they aren't rare or endangered, slaughter them and feed some of your fellow human beings. Humanity, this has gone on long enough. Please stop it with this socialism shit. It was all a scam and you've taken it way too far. Don't get me wrong, I love to see you suffer, but I want to be the one causing it. We stepped out of this one roughly around the time of Stalin thinking that'd be the end of it, but the joke seems to have gone over your heads. In some cosmic ironic twist, socialism has taken my job. Congratulations, humanity. You have effectively socialized and subsidized hell. Now please stop so I can get back to work. Until next time, my minions, via cum diablos, amici me.